This is the Demystifying Mental Toughness podcast, hosted by David Charlton, and you're listening to this podcast to help you build your own mental toughness, or so that you can support other people or your clients better. Either way, you will learn more about developing this plastic personality trait that all but guarantees that you will perform better and lead a more prosperous life. Welcome to episode 179 of the Demystifying Mental Toughness podcast. It's crazy to think that this podcast has been going for over 3 years now. So a big thank you to you, the listener, for making this show so popular and for the regular positive feedback to myself. It's so encouraging, and I'm really grateful to you. This week, I'm treating you to a solo episode with the focus on developing captains in a team sport context. We'll stick predominantly to a mental toughness standpoint, which obviously is the point of the show. Firstly, I'd like to emphasize the point about the importance of developing your mental toughness. I've seen it many times before where coaches have selection headaches, as I'm sure you have too, and they've looked at talent, skills, and technique, and they found it really hard to separate different players. However, those that have gone on to be selected are the ones that have something different, which often is closely linked to mentality, to dealing with pressure and difficulties, i.e. mental toughness. Now, back to captaincy. I'm going to look at this from a football or a soccer angle. Arguably, the role of a captain has the potential to be the most challenging and the most rewarding role. Leadership roles and responsibilities are often shared amongst players, yet the captain's role can remain dominant to the team's performance. Yes, captains must be competent in their performances, yet they also need to be able to inspire confidence in their players, evaluate game plans, and be flexible in their approach if circumstances dictate it. Captains need to be able to deal with pressure well. The hallmarks, as I say, of a mentally tough captain. They'll then go on to make smarter decisions. They'll communicate more effectively with their teammates, coaches, and likely the referee too. Not only is the captain a player, he or she is a leader, a skilled communicator, a calm decision maker, and a hugely important link between the team and the coach. When we consider the demands of captaining, many captains say that the psychological aspect of captaincy is the most difficult, because there's so much more to think about, as well as playing the game itself. This can be mentally exhausting and impact performance easily if it isn't managed right. So let's start thinking about the different aspects of mental toughness, where I'll share ideas, case studies, and some tips to help you or your players. Number 1, we've got emotional control. So here's a quote I've come across from former Manchester United player Rio Ferdinand. He talks about the importance of fire in the belly, but ice in the brain. So what does this mean? As a captain, if you lose self-control and you vent your anger or your frustration at an opponent, teammate, or a referee, you're going to likely lose the ability to make rational decisions. Your own performance will also possibly suffer. Your timing, your coordination, muscle tension, and motor skills will be impacted, as well as meaning your ability to read the game can become more narrowly focused. Another thing, as a captain who loses control of themselves, the opposition are going to be clapping their hands. They'll have spotted a weakness in you, likely boosting their confidence whilst undermining that of your team. Lastly, on emotional control, there's an argument to say, as captain, you're a role model for your players. The example you set must meet every expectation you have of your players. For example, if the captain becomes angry with the referee and goes on to constantly question referees' decisions, he or she cannot expect his or her teammates to accept refereeing decisions themselves. So how do you rate your emotional control on a scale of 1 to 10? 1 being you're very aggressive and up and down, 10 you are super calm and composed. If it's less than a 6, maybe some support would be really useful for you. And maybe simply recognizing the signs now will be enough. And you could think about having some triggers up your sleeve to use in a game to help you remain calmer. Perhaps a 30-second rule, where you allow yourself to settle, to breathe, before saying anything you shouldn't or reacting angrily. Secondly, we've got life control. Imagine if you have a captain who's defeatist, who has a can't-do attitude. Surely that would suck the life out of you as a player. You certainly aren't going to be inspired by them, are you? Encouraging yourself and encouraging others with a positive can-do attitude is the important thing here. I'd recommend you watch your self-talk and some of the things that you may say to yourself. Number 3, we've got confidence in your ability. And this takes me back to a sport that I enjoy playing, golf. The legendary American golfer Jack Nicklaus once said to a person in a small crowd about short putts that he'd never missed a putt inside 3 feet of the hole or 3 putt of the last hole of a golf tournament in his life. This was rubbish and something the spectator tried to remind him and questioned him. Jack chose to try and wipe the negatives from his mind. He chose to try to think that he played well. Now, as a captain in soccer or football, this positive approach is likely to inspire confidence in others, as well as helping you maintain your own performance level. When things are going well, this can be easy. Though when the going gets tough, it's obviously much harder, but arguably even more important. So when your team is behind in a game or struggling, a captain can really help galvanize a team by giving off an air of confidence to teammates. Looking and acting confident will sooner or later lead to being confident. A question for you. If your team is struggling, what would observers notice in you? Would your body language, your communication, your drive, or your energy change much? Do you let the scoreline impact on your own self-worth, I wonder? Now let's look at interpersonal confidence. This is to feel comfortable in group situations, to be able to assert yourself with your teammates or the coach. Is this a skill of yours, or do you tend to remain more passive? Essentially, we're talking about communication here, encouraging and managing on-field communication between all the players, as well as maintaining effective communication both with players and between players and the coaching staff. Again, when things are going well, this can be easier. Are you of the opinion that the only voice to be heard on the field should be that of the captain? If so, I disagree. Delegating and empowering teammates to communicate clearly should be part of your job too. There's an argument to say that the captain should only speak when necessary. Being able to keep his or her communication concise and to the point is important. People who like the sound of their own voices, let's face it, can actually be quite annoying, and their messages can often get ignored. We'll now consider the challenge measure of mental toughness, specifically learning orientation, which essentially is the ability to learn from mistakes. As a captain, yourself as an individual, and as a team, do you encourage this? Or can you point the finger and play the blame game? Encouraging culture of always learning, striving to get better, with less emphasis placed on outcomes, i.e. the scoreline, can help in this respect. To take emotion away, I'd encourage you to get some set processes in place during and then after matches in the way you make decisions and reflect on performances. Perhaps after matches, look at a warm review or a cold review, which Mark Bennett and I discuss in episode 166. Then we've got risk orientation, which is another element to consider. Do you keep pushing and stretching yourself? This again is a skill that you could master, and by doing so, you'll come across as a great role model to your teammates. Imagine playing for a safety-first captain who plays the ball sideways a lot, who doesn't actively encourage you to take risks, who was always ready to throw grenades at you when you tried something, or was obsessed with winning, which impeded the ability of teammates to express themselves. Some food for thought here, I hope. And now on to the last 2 sub-measures of mental toughness, which are linked to commitment. We've got goal orientation and achievement orientation, which I'll talk about together. Goal orientation is to be someone who sets goals a lot, for themselves and for the team, whereas achievement orientation links to your attention and sticking to promises or being derailed from your goals. If your goals as a captain are all about winning points, winning matches, achieving trophies and accolades, this is potentially going to be unhelpful to your teammates. What I'm not saying here is don't be competitive. That's right, be hugely competitive. Have the will to win. However, have an awareness about process goals. What you can control and what your teammates can control is the key here. For example, let's talk about bravery. Could you ask yourself and work with your teammates to be brave in the next match that you play, or in training, or both? Being brave will mean different things to different people, and that is absolutely fine. Being brave to the goalkeeper could be coming off his or her line, whereas to the centre-half it may be communicating loudly. Then for the striker, it's still making the runs and moving well when your shooting boots have failed you. As always, when there's more pressure, when the chips are down, this can be more and more difficult. But it's a skill that can be mastered, and that can help you and your team a huge amount. Give it a try. What I'd encourage you to do is to rate yourself for bravery this coming weekend on a scale of 1 to 10. Then continue to do so for 7 days. This is going to give yourself a big nudge in the right direction. And if you want to do this for the team in general and get individual players to consider doing this, even better. So I hope that you found these 8 suggestions helpful. We're talking about captaincy. However, my belief is if every footballer or player in team sports spent time working on these areas, they'd make themselves a far better player. They'd be respected much more by coaches. They'd be the go-to player. So naturally, giving themselves a better chance of selection. And something to consider too. The science behind this tells us that mental toughness can equate up to 25% variation in performance. So for me, you'd be crazy if you didn't take this more seriously and really try and up your mental game. You can do so by reading my weekly musings in the Mental Edge, a comprehensive newsletter I share weekly with many tips and tricks and resources. Until next time. If you enjoyed this episode of the Demystifying Mental Toughness podcast with David Charlton, do check out my website, sport-excellence.co.uk, and my online sports psychology resources. The Sport-Excellence website has essential resources for anyone looking to build their own mental toughness or the mental toughness of their athletes or teams, or if you want to achieve peak performance more often or optimal functioning. The Sport Excellence website has everything you need to keep moving forward and thrive. So go on, head over to sport-excellence.co.uk to find out more.